ko, like dito sa keyboard. So anyway, thank you, Sir Todits, for inviting me. It's a great opportunity for me to be with you this morning. And disclaimer lang, I'm not a social science teacher. I know you know more than me in terms of teaching social science to students. But this morning, I'd like to share with you some tools for sticky messaging. So, ano ba itong sticky messaging? Let me just share my slides. Dali lang po. Ayan. Sorry. How do I share? Share.
Pero yung present now.
Ako.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you see the screen po?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So so later on, I hope we have more time for question and answer. But I'll just run through this topic. So later on we'll see what sticky messaging is. But then essentially, from the word itself, sticky, lagkit, no? We want whatever we communicate to students to stick, dumikit, no? Sa mga utak ng mga students. And I'm sure, even if the learning is on campus, minsan mahirap na rin mismo na ipa-intindi ng students what we are trying to say. And even more definitely challenging to do it now that we are just interfacing through video. This kind of communications is even harder for us to do these days. So there is a concept called the curse of knowledge. Ano ba itong curse of knowledge na ito? So the authors of the book I'm referring to, which is Made to Stick, says that the more we know about things, the easier it is for us to assume that the people we are communicating to know what we are talking about. So because of that assumption that people already know what we are talking about, even if it's implicit only, it hinders us from communicating with the students or with the people we are talking to. So this morning, actually, the way we are doing this, itong topic na to, sana makatulong not only for your teaching of social studies, social sciences, but more on a general view of how we communicate what we want to communicate to others. So, iwasan natin, sabi nga nung authors nung book, iwasan natin itong curse of knowledge, itong sumpa na ito. Like for example, in teaching, probably you might have heard of this phrase from probably your principals or supervisors, ganyan, from the bosses, or even from among yourselves, how to maximize student potential. So it's very broad. You know what you mean. Like as a teacher, you know what you mean by maximizing student potential. But if you say, I want to maximize student potential to other people who are not teachers, it might be a challenge for them to understand it. And even for students, they might not be able to understand what does this mean. So, sometimes it could be confusing. It could be too broad. It could be too abstract. Now, let me show you these examples. Like for the first photo, ito sa left, this was a viral post on Facebook before, and probably you've heard it. Yung mga wag daw masyadong gagala-gala sa train, ganyan, mag-ingat, ganon. Kasi meron daw nag-i-inject ng syringe na merong HIV virus. Also, another thing, yung kwento na yung Coke daw, dahil daw yung Coke ay may acid, nakakalinis ng dumi sa kubeta, ganyan, it causes osteoporosis. And also, there is this very famous guy, Mr. Agapito Flores, Engineer Agapito Flores, who was said to have invented fluorescent. And also yung sinasabi nila na yung Great Wall of China daw is the only human structure that can be seen from space. Or another thing, did you know that only 10% that we only use 10% of our brain in our daily lives? As you would expect, all of these make good stories, but they are all untrue. Hindi po sila totoo. And I will not go deeper into these one by one. No, you can look them up later. But these are not true. But why did it stick to us? Why did it remain? Actually, ako hindi ko yun makalimutan. I think some of them I learned in elementary school. Why did these stick? And probably because of some elements of stories that people have been using. So another thing, for example, you see this photo, yung every time merong calamity, laging nai-invoke si Nostradamus. Parang lahat nahulaan niya. And many times as well, whatever he said in the past is debunked by someone else, saying hindi naman yan yung sinabi ni Nostradamus, etc., etc. Why do we like MMK? Alaala mo kaya, no? Or magpakailanman sa GMA? Because it tells us a story. We can follow it. It is a very, nasusundan natin yung bakit kaya ganito yung nangyari, ganyan-ganyan yung finish to the end. And also, look, meron din tayong mga pamahiin. Like, for example, pag meron daw namatay, pag namatayan daw, ganyan, wag daw magwawali sa gabi. Kasi malas. Or even actually kahit walang patay, no? Wag daw magwawali sa gabi kasi it will shoo away all the swerte. So all of these things, again, remain in our minds, and we carry on until we grow older. Pero most of them are just stories, are just that. And that's the reason it's good to reflect on these, because these things, even if we think na okay, hindi naman sila related sa social sciences, hindi naman sila related sa school, but these have common elements that you as teachers can take advantage of. Also, another thing, fake news and real news. Why is it that fake news is often more remembered by many, is often shared by many people compared to real news? Because sometimes real news is too overwhelming. Sometimes real news doesn't have a story, doesn't compel. On the other hand, a lot of fake news stories, although a lot of them are so abominable, but they are usually written in such a way that it's easier to understand, and they have common elements that it's easier to digest, and they have their elements that ensure their virality. So what if? So the overarching sentiment of this talk this morning for everyone is, what if we can use the common elements of these things, even the elements of fake news, to deliver the real things, the important things, the lessons that your students might be able to digest it even better now that it is more difficult to communicate. So, ito pa, to be more recent, a lot of people have also shared this information, which was, verified to be fake news as well. Nung nagsisimula yung pandemic, many people were sharing about these Chinese neighbors na nakasabay sa elevator. But everyone na lang may nakasabay na elevator na Chinese neighbors and doing the same thing. But people believe, especially if they have no access to verification. Because, again, this appeals to emotion. This tells a good story. This is this is simple enough to be digested. It taps on people's emotions, and it also taps on people's identity, not to be judgmental. But then again, it's fake news. But then the elements of effective communication, the elements of sticky messaging is there. So now let me bring down the point. What is this sticky? What are the elements of sticky messaging? And what is this sticky messaging? So you make something stick to people's minds and memories by using success. You make your communication a success. Should be simple enough. There has to be an element of being unexpected. And then it has to be concrete. It has to be credible. You need to tap on some emotions, and it has to tell a story. It has to tell stories. So I'll run through these one by one. Might not be able to delve deeper, but yeah, let's just go along. And maybe I hope I'll finish by 11:45, so we have some more discussions. So simple. Let's start with the simple. For every topic or every discussion that you want to communicate to students, you need to find the core and share the core. What is it, the single thing, the most important aspect that you want to communicate to them? Find that core and share it. And in journalism, there is this thing we call the inverted pyramid structure. So I'm not sure if there are journalism teachers here in this discussion, but for journalism teachers, you should be familiar with this, especially sa news writing, that in news writing, your first paragraph is the most important paragraph. That is the lead. And such that kahit na hindi na mag-pay attention kahit hindi na mag-pay attention yung nagbabasa after reading the first 3 sentences, the first 5 sentences, they still know the gist of the story. It's very difficult. I myself was a campus journalist when I was in elementary and high school, and particularly a news writer when I was in high school. Making the lead out of the so many details that are writing the lead out of so many details that are given to you is not easy, because you have to prioritize which one of them is the most important. And sometimes prioritization becomes subjective, because in news writing you find an angle, and that is the angle that you want people to remember. In the same way, probably in teaching lessons to students, such kind of prioritization may also be done. So what does being simple mean? Simple is that you communicate the core effectively, and also it is compact enough for people to remember. Like take for example this one. Can you make sense of it? I don't think so. But if we group them together, you see that these are more easy to remember. And this is what we call profound compactness. The pieces of information are not only short, but they are also they can also be easily remembered. They have meaning. They are profound. So now we know that these letters are this one. So this is just an analogy, but I hope you get what we are trying to say here. It has to be not only compact, but you deliver something that is meaningful to those who are listening. Also, another tool is the using of schemas. Schemas are, I think, a concept in psychology where you try to communicate a more complex idea by using something simpler but not totally accurate model to help them to help students understand um, the overall idea. Like for example, I'm a science major, so I'll use this example, yung sa model ng atom. Many of us are educated to think na yung atoms natin are like the solar system. But it's actually not. It's more of like the image in the center. But we understand that, okay, sige, itong model na ito ng solar system might work until you, which will lead to a better understanding of the more complex model in the future. So the schema there is the solar system. If you know the solar system, think of it like that. Parang ganun parang ganoon yung atom, pero hindi exactly ganoon. Pero it helps prepare the level of understanding. Also, we have the tool of using a high concept pitch. So, like for example, now many already use overhead LCD projectors. But before that, if you try to communicate what an LCD projector is to someone who hasn't seen it before, you can just say na, it's parang ano lang yan, parang overhead projector pero colored, gumagalaw. Even if an LCD projector doesn't exactly look like an overhead projector, but you get the idea. The high concept pitch of that is it's an overhead projector, only that it moves real time and it has color. So parang ganon. So let's go to the next element. The next characteristic is being unexpected. So one thing with the new generation, I think, with the newer generation, is that they have very small attention spans. Especially now, siguro sa online classes, because they're at home. There are so many distractions around. So it's important to do a grab and hold. Grab their attention by surprise and hold their attention by sustaining interest. So when we say we need to grab attention by surprise, there is a necessity to break a certain pattern. If students are expecting ganito yung lesson ni ma'am last week, ganun uli ngayon pero iba lang yung laman, then at some point it doesn't engage anymore. And we know that teachers try their best to communicate and to engage students, but also because of the limited attention span of kids, having nothing to break a certain pattern can disengage them from learning. Break people's guessing machines. So we commonly say pag nanonood tayo ng pelikula, alam ko na ending niyan. Kasi we have this, guessing machine na lagi namang ganoon. But then when we grab attention by surprise and we break people's guessing machines, i-skip ko lang, no? It makes it post-dictable. Ano ba tong post-dictable na sinasabi natin? Is, okay, you tell a story that sounds predictable, pero iba pala yung ending. But then it makes sense, kaya pala ganun. All the details were there. But I thought it's gonna end up with this one. And then they see, all these pieces of the puzzle connect together. So we need to avoid gimmicky surprise na yung for the sake of gulat lang, but we make them post-dictable. So yung surprise na nagme-make sense, hindi lang yung panggulat. Also, the element of surprise makes us want to look for answers. So when there is a break in the pattern, people try to make sense of them. And when we ourselves, and probably you know this on a personal level, when we ourselves uh, experience a break in the pattern of our daily lives, we try to make sense of it. And when we try to make sense of it, our own, it's harder for us to forget. So the authors say that common sense is the enemy of sticky messaging. So if the students think that that what follows is just common sense, some of them might think na they'd rather learn that themselves. Parang it's boring, ganyan. So there has to be something that changes the pattern every now and then. Like for example, let's see this. Text, no? Say, Mr. Pedro, the principal of Maayo High School, announced today that the entire high school faculty will travel to Cebu next Thursday for a colloquium in new teaching methods. Among the speakers will be historian Ambet Ocampo and UP Cebu Chancellor Dr. Liza Coro. So, what do we get here? Some might focus on the speakers. Some might focus on the principal making an announcement. Some might focus on teachers traveling to Cebu. But what is the thing that is in here? There will be no classes next Thursday. And it is post-dictable because it is already there. But it's not easy to spot because it has not been processed for the intended audience, especially to students. Okay? So for students, sometimes they don't care very much about the other details, but this is a detail they care more about. And then how to hold attention or interest. It's another tool is to create a mystery. So something that they always there are new questions that they need to answer. If I had longer time, siguro we can do it a little bit more interactive. But in essence, so pero ngayon puro ako lang yung nagdadaldal. Sorry for that. But it would be great to have a more engaged, like yung question and answer approach for lessons, no? Because when you create a mystery, you are creating this I must know more cloud. So according to George Liebenstein from Carnegie Mellon University, he formulated this gap theory of curiosity. If there is a general known information, and then but you don't directly give the answers, you create some hurdles, like very deliberate hurdles for them to find out what the information is. There becomes a zone of curiosity, an area when students will probably get excited, get thrilled to know more. So yun yung gap theory of curiosity, which you may be able to take advantage of. Okay, so we have the first one, simple. The next one, unexpected. And the third one is concrete. So let's help people understand, or students understand and remember, by using concrete tools. So like for example, this one. The abstract concepts, for example, of inequality, equality, equity, and justice are very much abstract. Sometimes some would think that they're highfalutin concepts, but I saw this infographic on Facebook. I think it's very useful. It's easier for us to digest, parang puno na nakatagilid at nahuhulog lang sa isang tao. Yun yung inequality. Equality, okay, nagbigay tayo ng equal na hagdan, pero ganun pa rin, dahil may difference pa rin in heights, hindi pa rin maabot ng isa yung apple. And then equity is, okay, para magkaroon sila ng chance pareho makakuha ng apples, yung isa binigyan ng mas mababang hagdan, yung isa binigyan ng mas mataas para abot niya. So abot na nila pareho. But then, tabingi pa rin yung puno at saka mas marami pa rin bunga sa kabila. While justice, ayan, so fixing the system, yung sistema mismo yung inayos, yung puno mismo yung inayos, so that kahit na yung distribution ng apples ay mas maayos at yung access to it is also equal among others. So, in just one visual, without even going through all those explanations that I did, it's easier to see because it's concrete. Language is often abstract. Like, for example, in business, you have terms like reciprocal cost-based engineering, customer-oriented visionary paradigm, strategic logistical values, and then also in teaching, we have itong mga metacognitive skills, intrinsic motivation, portfolio assessment, developmentally appropriate, thematic learning. So these things are good. And we understand it because we are in it. But if you talk to a student and you say, oh, I want to develop your metacognitive skills, I want to inform you, I want to teach you developmentally appropriate language, etc., it will not make sense to them. And of course, I may not be able to suggest exactly how to do that, but finding a way to do that, which of course requires effort, will be very much helpful in communicating and achieving your goals, in your teaching goals. So, as I said, language is often abstract, but life is not abstract. So it is necessary for us to be able to communicate effectively, to find something that is not abstract and connected to them, in order for them to understand and remember what you are trying to say. So let's use this example. So I give you a few minutes to think. Just pick one of the six, and then one of the six options. Like, remember the capital of Camarines Norte. Remember the first line of Bakit Ngayon Ka Lang? Remember the Mona Lisa. Remember the house where you spent most of your childhood. Remember the definition of truth. Remember the definition of a watermelon. So, Sir Tolitz, sir, are you there?
Yes.
Ayun. Sige, baka pwede tayong kumuha ng magre-recite sa bawat isa. Okay lang po? Kasi hindi ko kayo nakikita eh. So, sige po, sa number 1. Ako, number 1. Remember, ano po yung capital ng Camarines Norte?
Daet.
Daet. Okay. Remember, first line ng Bakit Ngayon Ka Lang?
Bakit ngayon ka lang?
Bakit ngayon ka lang? Bakit ngayon? Okay. 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 Yung, hindi ko na tinapos, sir. And then, how about remembering the Mona Lisa?
Walang kilay, sir.
Walang kilay. Okay. And then, you remembering the house where you spent most of your childhood.
House.
Meron po ba makapag-share? Ano ang
May hagdan, may tatlong tapakan na hagdan. Mayroong ang CR niya nasa loob lang ng bahay. Tapos sa ilalim ng bahay may manok.
Okay. Okay po. And then, thank you po dun sa nag-share. Sorry, hindi ko kayo nakita kasi
Sir Virgil Padirogaw.
Sir Lauren.
Thank you, sir. Remember the definition of truth. Sino po? Ano pong definition natin ng truth?
Definition of truth daw.
Reliable.
medyo pinag-iisipan. What if yung definition ng watermelon?
Red. Sweet.
So, okay po. So, actually, tinanong ko lang naman siya, itong questions na ito, is for us to compare the thought process. When you remember something like the capital of Camarines Norte, it was so quick. It's either you know or you don't know.
Yeah.
When you remember the first line of Bakit Ngayon Ka Lang, like for me, for example, I cannot remember the first lyrics of the song unless I sing it myself. And then, remembering the Mona Lisa, well, it's either you know or you don't know, but it adds another layer. Na okay, sige, alam ko yung itsura ng Mona Lisa, pero ano nga ba yung iba pang parts? Like, ano yung details nito? Might take more time to remember. When we remember the house where you spent most of your childhood, kinuwento nga ni Sir kanina, may hagdan, may manok sa ilalim. I suppose si Sir, nung inaalala niya, natatandaan niya kung saan siya umupo, natatandaan niya na siguro yung mga manok pinakain niya at some point, saan siya naghuhugas ng pinggan, saan siya palaging tumatambay. Whereas, yung remember the definition of truth minsan, mapapatanong ka, ano nga ba yung definition? Is there really a definition? It's too abstract. It's hard to answer also. And then the definition of a watermelon, has it ever been defined to us? Or we just know what a watermelon looks like and what a watermelon tastes like? These things align with what is called the Velcro theory of memory. Yung Velcro theory of memory is, alam naman po natin siguro yung Velcro, no? Yan yung dumidikit sa, like, ano ba? Sa Velcro. Ayan, nakikita niyo sa picture. So, yung Velcro kasi, it's made of like parang mga knots na bawat isang butil ba tawag doon? Basta parang hook, hook and, ano nga yung papapares ng hook? Hook and hindi. Basta, yung sisidlan, yung papasukan ng hook.
Hook and eye.
Hook and eye. Yes, correct. Ayun. So, each thing there is a hook and an eye that latches to each other. So, ang Velcro theory of memory is people tend to remember more in detail if it has attached to different senses. Like, for example, yung remember the capital of Camarines Norte, as I mentioned, it's either you know or you don't know. It doesn't really attach to any of my senses. But the first line of Bakit Ngayon Ka Lang attaches to my sense of memory, or a sense of sound. And then remembering the house where you spent most of your childhood brings a lot of senses alive. The sense of smell, sight, yung kinesthetic, touch, etc. Sound. So, the more senses that are attached to one particular memory, the easier it is for students or for people in general to remember. So, looking back to how it can be used for teaching, it's definitely harder to do it, especially now na online yung students. But if you could relate some of the lessons to things they see at home, experiences that aren't commonly experienced at home as well, it would probably make these analogies easier to digest for students and the concepts for them to remember. Next, let's go to the next C, credible. So, credibility helps people believe. Medyo shaky rin itong credibility, no? Na minsan, pag hindi credible yung nagsasalita, pero kahit totoo yung sinasabi, people won't believe. So, I would like to present to you two kinds of credibility. These are external credibility and internal credibility. Yung helping people believe. I'm not sure if many of you know, but when I was younger, ang alam ko, kaya may ulcer ang mga tao kasi pag nagpapagutom, pag hindi kumakain ng maayos, pag nag-skip ng lunch or uminom ng Coke, etc., So, yung ulcer before was associated with acid. But then two doctors from Australia, si Barry Marshall and si Robin Warren, said that it's not the case. They said that it is caused by a bacteria, and nobody believed them because they had no external credibility. They are not scientists who work on these mismo. They are internal, parang yung internists, so internal medicine. And the scientific community didn't believe in them na bacteria ang cause ng ulcer. You know what they did? Ininom nila yung bacteria. Nag-culture sila ng bacteria, nilagay nila sa isang solution, and they drank it, and then drank it in front of people, and waited for the symptoms to show. And this made people believe, after so many years of convincing other scientists, that ulcer was due to bacteria. So they earned their credibility by proof, but it is a hard way. It's a hard way to approach making people believe. So yeah, so it earned them the Nobel Prize Award for life sciences yata. And then itong external credibility. External credibility has two types, yung anti-authority at saka yung authority. So yung anti-authority is usually yung mga taong hindi sumunod sa isang bagay. Like for example, COVID restrictions, yung pagsuot ng mask or yung paniniwala na ito ay isang tunay na pandemic. So this guy, I forgot his name, pero he's from the US. He thought that coronavirus was a fake crisis. And then when he contracted it, he changed his mind. And then I saw his interview telling people now COVID is true. And then when you see this person saying that COVID is true at siya mismo naranasan niya yun dahil before he was not a believer, you would believe. There's a high chance that you would believe because someone didn't believe before but contracted it. So he becomes now credible. So he is an anti-authority. Let's go naman to authority. You probably don't know these two girls. I don't know them as well. Pero let's compare. Pag meron shampoo commercial, say si Chris Aquino yung tawag dito yung endorser, or si Ann Curtis, ganyan. Nag-i-endorse siya kunwari ng yung mga Palmolive. Di ko sure kung yun na ini-endorse nila, Palmolive, ganyan. And then yung isa mong kaibigan na dati medyo magulo yung buhok, pero gumamit ng shampoo, sabihin natin, Rejoice, ganon. Between Rejoice and Palmolive, kahit na gusto mo yung artistang nagpo-promote, pero yung kaibigan mo na sobrang gumanda yung buhok dahil gumamit ng Rejoice, there's a high chance. Masaya sana kung mag-sharean tayo dito, pero we have around 30 minutes left. So there's a high chance that you would believe your friend. And that makes her the authority, more authoritative actually than Chris Aquino or Ann Curtis. I would even do that myself. If someone uses a new product, sometimes, some of them might be relatively unknown, but if I see my friend using it, and then he or she sees good results, I'd probably try that too. And my friend now becomes the authority. He or she earns the credibility more than other endorsers who do so. Ano naman yung internal credibility? So, as we see kanina, external credibility is having other people make you believe. Yung internal credibility naman is the information itself has credibility. Like for example, again, this one I showed you earlier. Ito yung tungkol dun sa recto ko noon na pagtuturukan ka ng may syringe na may HIV. So many details like people, most especially students, know rectal is just most crowded in Manila. Sharing this story, I don't know if it's worth it. A student went to Recto to buy a book. So, ayan yung school. She was walking with a crowd. she felt her arm grow a little heavier. So may tactile sensory image tayo nito. When she looked and checked, she saw a syringe plunged in her arm with a note that said, "Welcome to the HIV world." At first, she thought it was nothing, a prank made by attention seekers. She decided to have herself checked in hospital. Ayan yung name ng hospital. And just in case, her result was HIV positive. So, this has internal credibility because it has so many details. No, regardless if it's true or not. But if you don't do your further research and don't know anyone from Manila, for example, who would refute this, you will believe it because there are power of details. That's why kailangan maging maingat din tayo when we read news online, news or fake news or articles online, because some of them use these tools to deceive other people, to communicate things that are untrue but make sense and has internal credibility. Also, we need to know when to use the statistics. So, meron tayong tinatawag na human scale principle. Na, for example, yung human scale principle is we need to put the numbers in perspective. If we say there has been more than 7,200 COVID-19 deaths in the Philippines, that's just a number. Wala pang 10,000, no? I mean, we should not discount because this is a very big number of deaths and this is very alarming. But then other people's attention might not be drawn because 7,200 in terms of money is hindi naman ganoon kalaki, pero in terms of people it's a lot. But if we reframe it this way, isipin natin na 7,200 ang sakay ng isang eroplano is divided by 150 passengers. 7,200 divided by 150, it's like 48 to 50 plane crashes mula nung February or March. Pero tayo, pag merong isang eroplano na bumabagsak, na may plane crash, we get alarmed already. But seeing just the number of this, some people don't get alarmed. Kasi sa ibang bansa naman, mas marami. But then these are deaths that are not in any way less important than those who are killed in plane crashes. So and if we communicate them, again, with a more concrete image of what these deaths probably are or how they are equivalent in more human terms, then we see the impact of the gravity of the situation. Another way to develop internal credibility is by creating testable credentials. Ito yung mga see for yourself. Okay, like for example, let's just use some basic economics, yung mga supply and demand, and then if you have students na may tindahan, and then you ask them about, like, sabihan mo sila na, okay, supply and demand works this way, o yung mga may tindahan dito, bantayan nyo yung dalawang produkto nyo dyan sa tindahan ninyo. See for yourself. And then they will probably see, kaya pala ma'am, sir, yun pala yung supply and demand. And it makes it stick to them even better. Now let's go to the fifth element, which is emotions. So, when we communicate, I think this is more of a more general na I'm not sure how it can be more conveniently used for teaching. But another element of sticky messaging is emotions. Make people care. There is harness the power of association. You can appeal to self-interest and appeal to identity. So make people care. So like for example, this quote from Mother Teresa, if I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at the one, I will. Ito yung ginagamit na strategy, say, ng mga charities. Minsan, if you say now, 10 billion, ganyan, hindi 10 billion, it's beyond the population. Say, 500 million, ganyan, people die of some disease or or are in poverty, etc. Okay, it's just a number. It's bad to hear. I'm sorry to hear that. But sometimes life goes on. But if you are shown a picture of a kid with undernourishment or may sakit, ganyan, say Bantay Bata, they usually show yung mga one or two kids having health problems. It taps on our emotion because we see the human element in it. We see them not only as a number but as a human. And it makes us act. Okay, sige, magpapadala na ako ng donation dito. That's one. Make people care. And then also another way to tap on emotions is to use the power of association. Sometimes it can be abused as well. So kapag in-abuse yung power of association, it's called a semantic stretch. Like for example, some people say na, oh, everything naman is relative. Pero, and when we say everything is relative, sometimes we associate them with Albert Einstein. But to some people's surprise, when they learn na relativity pala is not having a difference in the forces of in the forces of nature. Actually, yung relativity na dinidescribe ni Albert Einstein is that in a particular frame of reference, say, sumakay ka kunwari ng elevator, everything remains the same. And pero ginagamit madalas yung word na relativity if there are differences in opinions, etc. Pero the original concept of Albert Einstein is actually a little bit different. And that's semantic a semantic stretch, which still uses the power of association. People believe it because they say it's related to Einstein. But then, you can also use it in a good way by using the power of association in a more ethical way, maybe. And then another one, power of association with a concept. People are so used already to the term na sportsmanship pag natalo sa laro. One coach used a different term. Like instead of sportsmanship na sanay na yung ibang tao to know of, he used honoring the game, paggalang sa laro. And it made their athletes now feel better because it's not sportsmanship sometimes equates to losing, but honoring the game, you see a higher value of honor, a higher value of respect that deep inside athletes and people want to associate them with. Appeal to self-interest. Appeal to self-interest answers the questions, why? What's in it for you? So when we talk to other people or to students, it would be good to think about what's in it for your students to learn about a particular concept. What's in it for students to learn, for example, that this particular particular former president did this but failed, or this particular leader did this in the past, which was good, pero later on, nagkaroon ng unintended consequences. Okay, these are all good information, but what's in it for them? What can they get from these stories, from these concepts? Learning, say, the demand curve, for example. Ganyan. Ano yung makukuha nila dyan? Let me just give you an example of what's an appeal to self-interest. No? Like for example, tong Colgate, usually yung approach nila is more scientific. Proven by doctors, ganyan. Pero tingnan natin yung close-up. Ang close-up, hindi nga nila sinasabi na sila yung pinaka-magandang formula ng toothpaste. Pero sinasabi nila, and what they communicate in their ads is that close-up is the toothpaste that will get you closer to your crush. So, it appeals to self-interest in a way that they still get to communicate. Kasi di ba, pagka mabango yung hininga mo, baka maganda nga yung toothpaste. So, in the same way, dun sila nakakapag-tap sa self-interest ng tao na hindi naman nila actually desire in itself yung malinis na ngipin at mabangong hininga, pero yung higher need nila is to get closer to their crush. Consequently, nagiging malinis yung ngipin nila because they use close-up. Ganon. So those are the consequences of using this method. And for those na interested in psychology, probably you've seen this, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So these are the self-interests that you may want to tap on when you do your lessons for your students. And itong hierarchy of needs, saying na ito yung physiological needs yung pinakamababa, which is, again, kung iti-take natin yung example ng close-up at saka Colgate, yung Colgate physiological needs, malinis ng ngipin. Pero yung close-up, they tapped on love, intimacy, no, sense of connection, more than the ngipin. And, finally, stories. So, there are two kinds of stories that are useful for communication. Stories are as simulation, how to act, and stories as inspiration. So, gives people the energy to act. So, stories as simulation. I think ang lagi ko naaalala is yung sa economics, no, kasi maraming simulation diyan, no. Halimbawa, ito ibenta mo ng ganyan. Meron ka kunwaring apples, meron kang oranges. Ito mas marami, ito mas onte, etc., etc. So it makes students simulate it in their minds how they're happening. And it is said that mental practice alone produced about 2/3 of the benefits of actual physical practice. And stories as inspiration, we are very much familiar with it, with the different kinds of plots that we can use. A challenge plot. So I think in the Philippines, it's so popular. Laging meron tayong David and Goliath story. And we gusto natin, natatalo natin yung kasamaan, yung kadiliman, etc. And it makes us remember more easily. It attaches us to them. Connection plot, yung mga Good Samaritan stories, it drives us to do good to other people. And the creativity plot, like for example, yung Newton's apple. So these things, as you see, marami tayong kwento na maaalala na nagpa-follow ng ganitong plot. Halos pare-pareho lang yung plot, iba-iba lang yung characters, iba-iba lang yung naging outcomes, but it's easy for us to remember. So, in summary, sticky messaging is a combination or the use of any of the following characteristics: simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, tapping on emotions, and creating stories. It helps people or students pay attention, understand and remember, agree or believe, care, and act. So, ayun po. Maraming salamat po sa pakikinig, and then maybe we have like 10 to 15 minutes of question and answer. Thank you very much.
There you go. Thank you so much, Sir Lawrence.
So much, friends. Ingat dyan.